How's your ICM study habits? Any revelations? Uh, any particularly striking discoveries?
Yeah, I mean, I use what's out there. I mean, the ICM stuff you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, right? Because it's an imperfect model. It's the best we have right now, and I think you can definitely get a lot of insights from it, and I definitely have. But at the end of the day, you still have to um, adjust for what you think the flaws in the model are gonna produce. So it's kind of I think this is why tournaments are kind of the last form of poker that's going to be solved, and like the probably like the healthiest form, because like to if you want to actually get the answer to a question about a tournament poker hand, you have to essentially simulate the whole rest of the tournament. Like the game tree would just be like astronomically big, right? Yeah, I mean, I use the tools that the best tools that we have right now, but I think they fall short of what we need to know actual answers in the same way that Peel Solver or whatever other solver has solved like heads up cache, for example.
Um, yeah, I mean, that seems for sure true. I know it doesn't take into account like how stack sizes are affected in the future game trees. It doesn't take care. I forget what it's called. Future doesn't take care. It doesn't take into account future game possibilities. Um, I do want to mention a few nuances of ICM that people may that would be useful for the audience, such as, for example, like the difference between. I mean, I don't know what's obvious to you. Like, who knows? Like, I imagine you know your shit really well, but there's like quite some nuance in if you're the chip leader or the second chip leader, or if there's multiple short stacks. Especially like the final table, this can like drastically affect your play depending on your stack size and things like that. And even like the
Hmm.
bubbles, like quite different from that. For example, I mean, one thing that's probably obvious to you is that the short stacks usually they're way less likely to want to bust during closer to the bubble versus like a final table where the pay jumps are quite small. Because whereas I'm not sure if people like recognize like how big of a difference that can do it that can make, and also um, how wildly the pre-flop ranges can change because of that. Definitely, I made all kinds of mistakes that were related to cash games, like opening a bunch of stupid shit
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. I think this is ICM 101. Um, how I'm trying to think of a good question to ask you to so that you could demonstrate a little bit of your insight into this. Like,
Oh yeah, I
um,
mean, I so one of the biggest kind of revelations from studying this stuff, which makes sense if you think about it, is all of this like three bet folding off of shallow stacks or four bet folding off of shallow stacks, things that you wouldn't do in a cash game because you're just getting the odds to call all in. But in a tournament, if you think about how your the value of your stack is mapped, each chip isn't worth the same amount, right? So the your last few chips are worth the most, and then like each one you add is worth less and less and less. So say you were gonna um, four bet fold for half of your chips, for example, you would never do that in a cash game because you need, you're getting 3 to 1 to call it off. You're always getting the right price. But in a tournament, because half of your chips aren't half of your EV in the tournament, they might be only like 20% of your EV in the tournament or whatever. Now you can do things like four bet fold half of your chips, and it still makes sense because it's not half of your value. Um, so like that was one thing that really stuck out when I first started looking at this stuff. Raise folding off of like nine big blinds or three bet folding off of you know 15 or whatever. Um, that kind of stuck out as something
oh, that's a good
that
one.
changes a lot with ICM.
That's a good one. One thing I learned. relatively recently is someone can, based off the stack sizes, open a very wide range, but another player can shove profitably, with can still, it can be correct to open a really wide range, like in a certain stage of the tournament, and but another player can shove profitably if they know how wide you're opening, and that, if they don't know how wide that person's opening because of how unattractive it is to bust. But there's like, it has to. There's quite some subtlety with, if, like, there's multiple short stacks and all of that. I have to think of the example, but there's this hand where this Brazilian player shoved over nine, something like any two cards versus an open from one of the larger stacks of the table, and the Brazilian guy, I believe, did not cover the other guy. Did you see this hand by this? I believe by this Peter guy. These Brazilian guys actually have done some very smart things, to my knowledge, that were really, really surprising. But it
I'm
seemed
not
like it
aware of
didn't
the
make
hand
sense.
that you're talking about exactly.
I
Uh,
should. I didn't think of I'd be talking about this, but I should have got the stack sizes. But it didn't make any sense to me, because it's like, why would you? At least at first, but it's like, why would you open a wide range and then the counter response is for the guy to shove? But an exploited response would have been, yeah, to shove all in. It's just the guy couldn't call because he puts, like, the middle guy, puts a lot of pressure on the middle guy, and he has enough leverage to open wide versus the the last the player Peter, who shoves like any two, but he just, like, almost can't call like an all in, because of how many, like, short stacks are out there. But yeah,
mhm.
some really strange things happens once you start playing with the ICMs that are counterintuitive from cash perspectives, and it's something I need to study more, actually.
Sure, and it's
But yeah.
so. I think I that's what I love so much about tournaments is that it's so nuanced and it's so every situation is so unique. Like you tweak one stack size, or you tweak the positions of where the big stack is, or you make small changes like what the payout structure is, whatever, and like everything changes. So um, that keeps it like really fresh for me and really interesting as a game. I
Mhm.
still love studying it and thinking about it and playing it. Um,
Is there one
yeah.
particular hand that you've played that stands out? Well, one, it doesn't have to be your favorite or whatever, that stands out where you just something very unusual due to ICM that you would never do in a cash game, and that was like a pretty big EV. Either was either big EV play, big EV difference between something else, or was just a hand that seems very unusual, and that is, like, shocking in that kind of way to see.
I guess one hand that probably the biggest equity pot I've ever played, most likely, was four-handed in the Triton Million,
Mm-hmm.
and I it was four-handed. Bryn was chip leader. I was second in chips, and then there was Aaron Zhang, who was on the shorter side and playing very tight, and Dan Smith, who was I think third in chips and also playing tight, like playing well because you're supposed to be tight. I opened cutoff and Bryn shoved the big blind for like I think around 30 effective. Um, and so it's a situation where the solvers are going to tell you to call off very very tight, being second in chips and like risking busting before the other two. I thought that um, the future game considerations were extreme in that situation because basically we were at kind of this tipping point where if Bryn got a few more chips, he was going to be able to just like completely dominate the table, play almost every hand. I was on his left, and like as second biggest stack, I couldn't really do anything about it. And then Aaron Zhang was the shortest stack, and I thought that he was playing too tight. So I thought that this situation was going to last like longer than it should. and that it would be really bad for me. And whereas if I were to call and win and double up into the chip lead, then it's kind of the same situation, but I'm in the driver's seat, right? So I'm the one who gets to like raise a lot of pots and kind of win more than I should. So I thought that it was a really extreme future game situation, and I made like quite a big deviation to call off pocket sevens
Hmm.
to try and basically gamble for the big stack and try and win the tournament. Uh, he had uh, he had king jack off and didn't work out for me. It was probably the pot was probably worth like, and yeah, he won. I guess he shot the tournament and came second, and I came fourth. But I guess that would be an example of a big deviation I made in an ICM situation that might surprise some people, and something that still I don't know, like if it was too big of a deviation, if my reasoning was sound or not. I guess gotta wait until they develop some better tools to really know the answer.
If you happen to play some live poker, you got to know what the rake is, you got to know what realistic win rates are, you got to know this kind of stuff. Speaking of which, on the Jungleverse, we provide many resources to help many of you up and coming players in order to avoid many pitfalls that many people play, also to avoid getting cheating. We provide some details of what to look out for. We have a map of what the best online sites are to play at and why, and what kind of games you're looking for. If you want to try your luck and try to strike it rich playing tournaments, why not? The math's a bit against you. We have the resources for that too.
Well, that one would be that one seems like a big deviation from ICM. It seems that one's like more of the future game. That was a
Yeah,
good great
exactly.
hand
Yeah.
actually because it you just consider the future game considerations to matter like weight a lot, that you could like go wider than quite a bit wider than ICM, right? I would think that's quite a bit wider. I would think seven. Yeah,
Yeah.
my guess is it's like 1 or 2 pips too loose, but
Yeah,
I
at
don't know
least.
that. Really, it's more than 2 pips loose.
Well, I mean, I think probably he shouldn't have a shoving range, so we're kind of in fantasy land from the start. I think he should only be three betting smaller, and then depends what you want to how you want to range him, I guess. How heavily you want to put him on low pairs and ace-x suited type stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess if you set up the tree to where he had to shove some stuff, I expect it would be like tens or something.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's quite a big deviation for sure.
All right. I was thinking nines, but I don't know these things that well. And you forgot one very important consideration that is often overlooked.
What's that? Winning the tournament is pretty sweet.
Well, I didn't even think of that. That's actually important. But I personally would not have been particularly thrilled to sit at a table four-handed and have Bryn Kenney raise every hand, especially if he's like on an upswing or something like that. I mean, the pain of that is worth at least 1 pip in my opinion. Uh,
Gotta factor all these things in.